Thank you. So, begin with the end in mind. Actually, I wasn't a singer at school. I was kicked out of my school choir, first in a 400-year history. So feeling a little bit uncomfortable. But the whole idea is begin with the end in mind. And towards the end of my last session, I said, well, what if we could think ahead? What if we could think ahead 15, 20 years' time and think about what our portfolio would look like? Either if we're going to transfer it to an insurance company or if we're going to buy out. We're probably going to end up with between 35 to 50% in gilts and cash supporting LDI strategy, really hedging out that interest rate and inflation risk. That collateral may also have to hedge out some longevity risk, and Nehar's going to come up in a moment and help you think through when might be the right point to think about longevity risk in the context of the beginning, middle, and end. You also want to build up a whole load of investment-grade corporate bonds to maybe cash flow match, generate an excess return, and you might want to think about some illiquid credit. And the range of those will change depending on what rate of return you want to take and how much risk. But I want to come right the way back because our next speaker, Dan, is really going to be talking about looking back over the last 10 years worth of data and saying, really, what did you need to do to get from TP underfunded? So 10 years ago, the pension regulator was set up and the average funding level in the UK was 84%. And yet 10 years later, despite £300 billion worth of contributions being paid in by the FTSE 350, we find ourselves still, on average, at 84% funded. Luckily, many of you in this room are better than that, but on average, we find ourselves there. And so Dan is going to explore why it is that many pension schemes haven't found themselves where they are. The challenge is really about balancing affordability with sustainability, and it's this idea of ampersand. It's this idea of how can I make sure that we're investing our assets to get that positive rate of return above our liabilities, whilst at the same time managing our liabilities and the interest rate and inflation risk that has really caught every pension scheme off guard. But then there's the middle, and in fact the middle is quite challenging, and if any of you have ever played chess, you know that the middle is probably the hardest part and the easiest place to lose a game of chess, because the beginning's easy, you just remember the openings, and about 5 to 10 moves in, it gets bloody hard, and then you want to maybe swap off a few knights and a few bishops and make it simple again. And I'd say that the middle is really tough, because you're probably at TP full funding. And whereas down here you had loads of risk appetite, yeah, bonds are going up, I love equities, all of a sudden your risk appetite has changed. You're like, oh, we're fully funded on a technical provision. I don't really want to fall back down to 84%. And so we see that behavioral nature change, both from sponsor and trustees. But there is no real framework to say that there needs to be contributions to get you from here to here. And therefore, getting that balance right in investment strategy requires a very complex balancing act. And it does require thinking about leverage. It does require thinking about collateral. And certainly as I have conversations with many of you in this room, the big question is how much collateral, how much leverage. And Phil, when he's going to come and talk to you, is going to talk through that theme. Unfortunately, we have 5 minutes, but Phil, Dan, and I will be around afterwards. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Dan Mikulskis.
Before Dan comes on, thanks, Rob. Okay, so at the end of these next 5, we're going to go to questions, and I'd love to see some more questions come through. So if I could just please request you take your phone out, and if you could text or email questions either that have come up so far or that come up in the next few segments, to make sure that we can cover them in our panel at the end of these 5 presentations. So once again, next up we have Dan Mikulskis, who's co-head of ALM at Reddington and is reflecting on 10 years of DB data. Dan, you need a minute? Okay.